What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. Aloha, y'all. Daniel Aaron here. I'm your host. This is the Art of Vibrant Living show. And indeed, we are here to empower you, to entertain you, to create your most vibrant, thriving life. We got an amazing show today. I'm so excited for this conversation. I've been looking forward to it for ages. I'll tell you about Peter in a minute. First, an offering, a suggestion. I implore you, be entertained and do something with this information. Make a commitment right now that what you are about to watch or listen to is actually so valuable that you will put it into place in your life and create miracles, that you will change your life because of what you get today. Because that is what does it. That's where the rubber meets the road. On that note, if I can be of assistance to you, if you'd like to have a conversation, I would love that. Feel free to send me an email, daniel@danielaaron.com. I would love to connect with you. And Peter McCammon, our guest today, is a life and leadership coach working mostly with leaders and owners of small to medium enterprises to create lives and businesses that they love. He's been married to an amazing woman called Jules since 1991. They've got two incredible kids currently following their dreams in Australia. And Peter's biggest passions outside of his family and work are his desire for growth, my kind of guy, and almost addiction to fitness and training. Y'all, thank you for being with us. And Peter, thank you for being with us. Welcome.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, total pleasure. You've had an interesting experience in your life. I love your values, what you're up to. It's always a joy for me to speak with fellow coaches, right? That orientation toward growth and service. How did you get here? How did you get into who you are now and what you're up to now?
Okay. Well, I had a pretty regular start through school and university. And then I found my way into a family business, which was my dad worked in it, my mom, my two brothers. It was a retail company that my dad had started to grow. I spent almost 20 years there. I had a burnout experience and found my way to a psychotherapist to figure out why what had happened to me. And during that time, I remember one day looking across the therapy room at him, and the thought came to mind: you should have a go in his chair, and so I did. I signed up for a training as a psychotherapist, and left the family business, and I worked at that for about 10 years. And 2016, I found my way into a coaching course. And on the back end of that, I juggled therapy and coaching for a few years. And then during the pandemic, after the first kind of major series of lockdowns in the UK, I made a decision to come back as a coach full time. And so I've been coaching full time for 4 years now.
Okay. Cool. I love the way you put that. You should have a go in his chair. What will you help us like understand that, like zoom in a little bit more? What drove that? What else were you thinking or feeling that brought that impulse?
A great question. I mean, I'm not terribly sure, other than, I mean, at the time, I guess I had this burnout experience, which left me functioning at a much lower level than I'd been at any time that I remember. And I guess I was curious about, have I fallen out of love with retail, or is it something else? And I'll find my way back into that. And so I guess it was an openness to consider other things at that time. And I was very curious about, what was it about me at that time that had led to all of that. So I think that there was a natural curiosity to understand myself more, a natural curiosity to, I think, well, curiosity, I suppose, a desire to change something so that I wouldn't end up back where I had found myself late in 2006. So I think when that kind of question hit me, it was one of those questions that it felt like a nudge from beyond myself, a nudge from the universe, and whenever one of those nudges comes, it's almost as if I don't feel any resistance to it, and it was one of those moments, and I just followed it, and yeah, I ended up following it very seriously. Changed the rest of my life.
That's beautiful. Well, and I'm with you. I know my version of those nudges, and I really know the difference between when it's a clear message or impulse or voice, and it comes in, and my experience is similar in that no resistance, like, okay, that's what's happening. And I can distinguish that from the many other times in my life where I say, oh, what am I going to do? Should I do this or should I do that? And I'm, trying to figure it out, and the steam's coming out of my ears, so to speak. And I also highlight that for you to do that, for anybody to do that, takes courage, right? Because I imagine that was a big shift, right? To shift from what you were doing, what you've been doing for 20 years, and to say, oh, I'm going to train as a therapist. Oh my goodness, right? And a bit later in life, you weren't at uni for the first time or something.
No, I was just coming up to my 40th birthday. And I mean, it felt like the biggest decision was probably at that time the one to leave the family business. That was the most difficult decision. Once I'd made that decision, or by the time I made that decision, I knew the direction I wanted to go, and I'm very, very grateful to my family, who were hugely supportive. I'm not sure that they at the time fully understood it, but they to give them their credit to them, they supported me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, well, and maybe there's double credit deserved, right? Because sometimes in that kind of scenario, like, there's just the resistance, like, how could you leave us? You're leaving the family business, and all that's entailed with that. But also, there could be, I'm not saying that wasn't your family, but going into psychotherapy, that could be provocative for people, right? I know in my own family, as I've gone more and more into healing and therapy and growth and coaching, sometimes I feel it. Sometimes I actually hear it from my family, like a little bit of a fear, like, well, what's wrong with us? Why do you need that? We had the same childhood kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think my a very close relationship with my brothers, and I think we've well, it was quite a while since I left now, but we've had a lot of conversations, and there's a I know they completely get it now. So, and I've had the privilege of being able to go back into my family business and do some coaching over the last few years. So I've absolutely, I appreciated and enjoyed that no end. So it almost felt like when I was doing that work, almost felt like I'd kind of come full circle in a way. So I'm very, very appreciative of that opportunity as well.
Yeah, well, as you spoke at it, I love you said come full circle. It's a bit of a version of the hero's journey, right? To have gone off on the adventure of learning psychotherapy and coaching, and then bringing those gifts back to the village or the family or the business.
Yeah, I guess there is a similarity there. Yeah.
So, question then for you, Peter, because I get this question a lot, and I'm so eager to hear your way of looking at it. What is the difference between coaching and therapy?
Okay. Well, for me, therapy is primarily a much more backward-looking, I suppose, endeavor, where it becomes it's much more looking at the past and what happened and why that happened, and helping people to understand maybe patterns of behavior, or responses within them to events that happened in their past, and how that maybe impacted somebody on a behavioral level or an emotional level, and creating that kind of understanding, and by virtue of that, creating possibility for them to move forward in a different way. Coaching, I would say, is primarily much more forward looking, in terms of you are where you are. What is it that you want to create in your life, in your business, or in your relationships? And so for me as a coach, I'm showing up with those questions in mind, trying to understand where somebody is and where they want to get to. And my job is to help them to see the greatness that exists within them already, to enable them to move in that direction.
Yeah, cool. That's articulate. I'm with you. All right, I want to reflect back a couple things and see if we can go a little deeper.
Sure.
I met up this past week with Dr. Ivan Meisner, the guy that started the Business Networking International group, and
Okay.
he was visiting here on Maui, and part of his conversation with a little group of us was to address the continued fallout we have from the fires that happened a little over a year ago here, right? Big collective traumatic event, and a phrase I'm amazed I never heard this, or I didn't notice it. Phrase he used over and over with a lot of compassion and understanding is, in life, you can only go so far if you're looking through the rear view mirror. There's a reason that the front windshield is bigger than the rear view mirror, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way you spoke about therapy and coaching, orientation toward the past, perhaps with a use for the future, but orientation toward the now and the future as a distinction I like. And this might be, I don't know, how does this land for you? One of the ways I've heard of it spoken, look, I'm just dulling that down out of fear myself. I'm noticing I've heard of it spoken. Well, it was me that spoke it. So the way I've spoken of it sometimes is therapy, and this is overgeneralized, not always true, but therapy can be going from less than functional to functional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the orientation of the psychotherapeutic model for many, many years prior to positive psychology movement that started, right? And I think of coaching as going from functional to phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of variance and exceptions, but how does that land for you? What do you think when I bring that out?
Yeah, I mean, I love. I mean, certainly in my work, and I've because I've worked in both areas. Most of my clients who came to me as a therapist, they just wanted to get back to normal life as it was before they experienced whatever bump in the road that they hit, that left life not as workable for them. Whereas my coaching clients come because they want to get somewhere, and so I think that really aligns with what you're saying. I think the work of Martin Seligman in the whole area of positive psychology really opened up that kind of, I suppose, that spectrum of possibility, to move into a life where people can actually thrive, and experience life in the fullness that is available to us, is a real possibility. We don't have to settle for just that middle ground of life as normal, whatever that was for people, or whatever that is for people.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think it was even the title of one of his books was Flourishing.
Yeah,
Right. And I just
really.
love the metaphor of, I think of flowers. Here in Hawaii, we've got a lot of bougainvillea. And when bougainvillea is flourishing, it's just like, wow, it's just, it's breathtaking and beautiful.
Yeah.
So this is fun because something else came to mind for me as you spoke that I'm going to, toss the ball over into your court with again. And I'm curious to see what comes for you with that. Like I've heard said, and I guess I've said it too, that to me, one of the things that I less than love about some aspects of the therapeutic model, even psychoanalysis specifically, but it's kind of a model of, again, overgeneralized, and no insult. I've gotten so much benefit from therapy myself. I love it. It is kind of a model that come and, lay on my sofa or sit in the chair every week on and on and on and on. And even in the US anyway, we've got insurance that will pay for that for a lot of people for on and on and on and on. And there isn't necessarily a point where it's like, okay, that's enough, or now it's time to move on. Unless, maybe together we say, okay, we've gotten to normal, good enough, time to move on. And in one way, you could look at that and say, well, that's a good business model, right? Because they're just going to keep paying, that's like Netflix. They pay every month. On the flip side, though, what you just brought to mind for me is coaching is a different model in that, well, people are only going to pay for coaching if they're seeing results, if their life or their business is getting better. However, there is an inherent orientation toward the customer or the client in coaching, which is it can just keep getting better and better. So in one way, that's a much better business model because there's always more flourishing available. Right? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, the therapy model, it for me is just as a business model, it's time for money in a sense, where people can just keep coming and paying whatever it is per hour or per 50-minute session. And therapy, as I've kind of understand it and experienced, it's much more client led. It's much more for the client to decide what why they come and how long they come for and when they're finished. Whereas for me, coaching, it's much more it's a partnership. I see myself as being in partnership with my clients to help them to get to where they want to get to. But the model is very different, and you're right in saying that there's always more available. I really, we can grow infinitely. I don't, we can keep taking whatever our current ceiling is and making that a floor, and keep going ceiling to floor, and that's potentially never ending. But what I love about how I see coaching is that it's much more about the value that I create in somebody's life rather than an exchange of time for money. It's much more about what we're creating and the value proposition that exists in that, and the value that can be brought to somebody's life through, really significant change and transformation in different areas of their life.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. So then, question for you, right? Because you and I, we've drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, right? We are in it. We have coaches in our lives. We have the great blessing and honor and privilege of coaching other people. And so for you and I, part of the Kool-Aid, part of the water we swim in, I think, tell me if this is accurate, is that we can really easily see and experience the value of that kind of work or that kind of partnership, right? And so for people that maybe haven't been so obsessed with growth and haven't had so much experience with it, how do you help them to see the value that can be there, and why it might be worth investing financial resources as well as time resources into that kind of partnership?
Um, well, I suppose personally, when people find their way to me, sometimes they've been coached before, but more often than not, they haven't. And they're usually they find their way to me for some kind of a reason, and it may be that they're, stressed and want life to be more manageable. It may be that there's a business goal or a goal in life or a relationship that they want to access or achieve but haven't been able to. And at that stage, I'm very much I want to offer them an experience. And so my first the first thing that I try and do is to understand what it is that they want to be different. And if I think I can help them with that, and if our initial connection has gone well, I will always offer people an experience, because I think coaching it's a very unique thing, because every coach operates very, very differently. There's no, I don't think there's no kind of, you can't box it in so many ways. There's so many coaches with so many different flavors or approaches. And the only way that I can help somebody to understand whether coaching with me would be helpful for them or not is to offer them some kind of an experience. And when I offer them an experience, that then they have a chance to understand what it would be like to work with me. They have an opportunity to understand, or actually they have an opportunity to experience that on a level of how that made them feel in the first instance. And secondly, inevitably from that conversation, they'll go off with some action to take, and they will have a chance to see if that makes a difference to their life, their world, how they're living, and based on that, then they're in a much more informed position to make a decision. So I would say to anybody that's curious about coaching, is to talk to different coaches and get an experience of what it's like. Spend time with different coaches and really get an experience of working with somebody. And I think coaches, different coaches will approach this in different ways, but if you can really get an experience of working with somebody, that's the best way to be informed about whether coaching with a specific person or coaching in general will be helpful for you.
Yeah, well said. I'm with you. And it could be argued that the only real knowledge is from experience, right? So 100% agreement that actually having an experience to know, what it could be like is beautiful. Okay, so I'll shift gears a little bit. When I read about you to the audience earlier, right, your biggest priorities are your family and your work. Outside of that, though, you mentioned growth and physical fitness and training. So what growth, right? You mentioned that specifically. What does that mean to you, and why is that important?
I think for me, I suppose just reflecting back, I went probably between the ages of 20 and late 30s, I thought I had figured life out. I thought I knew. I had a period where I was like, I think I know. It was almost as if I knew all that I needed to know. And I had a burnout experience in 2006, which I went from functioning at what for me at that time was me functioning at a high level to within 6 months functioning almost not functioning at all. And I wanted, I guess at that time I wanted answers to that, and I wanted. I wanted to know why, but most of all, I wanted to make sure that it didn't happen again. And in the middle of, I suppose, or through the journey of coaching and understanding myself, therapy and understanding myself, and then moving into coaching, I realized that there was a world in which I could continue to grow and thrive. And I've just become captivated by the possibility that life is it's not static. Who I am is not a fixed thing. Who I am is always, the potential exists for me to grow, to change, to transform, to be a better husband, to be a better coach, to be a better friend, to be a better son, to be a better brother, to have better and better and better relationships. I have a PT called Jordan, and Jordan has this concept that he talks about in his work, and he talks about a top 1% body and a top 1% business. He works with people who run businesses, and I really love that idea in terms of, I bring that to my health and fitness, and I bring that to my business, but I haven't stopped there. I want to bring that to my relationship with my wife and my kids. I want to bring that to my relationship with my clients. I want to bring that to my relationship with my brothers and my friends. I want to bring that energy to the communities that I'm part of. And so for me, that's just become a journey that is, I mean, for me, it's so much fun. When I recently renewed my coaching agreement with my own coach, he pointed this out to me. We were talking about, a financial goal for my business, and I said, yeah, we could do that, but I'll be honest, that doesn't excite me. And he paused for a minute, and he said, Peter, the thing that I know that seems to excite you most is actually your personal growth, and it does. And so I'm just on that journey, and it continues, and I love it.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, and I believe you because I see you light up as you say it. And the concept that you highlighted there, one of them is that, right, who I am can continue to evolve and grow and expand. And of course, the obvious reference for this concept in our culture now, who made it most famous, is Carol Dweck with her growth mindset work. But really, I'm highlighting this because what you're talking about goes much deeper than that, because a lot of what her work is about is like, you can get better at math, and you can get better at, it's kind of like you can grow in your ability to do things. But what I hear you saying is you can grow in who you are, and that can bleed out and affect every aspect of life, every relationship.
Right? Yeah, I really see it that way. It's not just a mindset thing for me. It goes deeper than that. And I guess a place that's become really important for me to, in that whole transformation, was beginning to understand I guess in a historical way, my own self narratives. I think understanding my self judgments, and this is something that's become huge for me over the last couple of years, where I came to see that I had lived much of my life and leveraging my outcomes through judgment of myself, by just trying to be better and better and better because I thought I wasn't good enough. And that was I suppose, just I'm going to call it an operating system, if you like, that by which I worked, by which my life worked. It was trying to be good enough, and I would become better and better and better at things. But no matter how good I became, the underlying belief of me not being good enough always trumped the outcomes that I was achieving. And so what that led to a number of what I would call minor burnout experiences, and one really major burnout experience. And so one thing that I've worked a lot on over the last couple of years is changing my narrative about myself, is shifting those, not those beliefs, but it's not so much about beliefs, it's about changing the narrative that I hold for myself about myself. And that takes the form of something what I call a document, which is a list of declarations that I've created about myself that reflect the person that I am being and want to be in the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, and I love that you said that, because I love all of what you said. Sometimes when I'm speaking to people, I say, "Oh, you're a coach. What kind of coach are you?" And so I don't know how to like say I'm an X coach or a Y coach or a D coach. So I say a little bit about how who I work with and how I help them and what occurs and how I see things. Um, and then sometimes I do that and they say, oh, you're a mindset coach.
Mm.
And I say, well, it's not that that's wrong. It's just that there's something much bigger or deeper than that. Mindset to me is something like the water that comes out of the spring of who we are being, which is part of what I hear you speaking about. And as you're talking about that narrative of not good enough, always have to be better. Of course, well, not of course. I resonate with that a lot because it's certainly been a part of my journey, working with that narrative, learning from it, adjusting it. I was going to say overcoming, maybe just upgrading it. And even as you were saying it, I could just feel in my chest and belly that like, oh, like it's so painful that narrative of I'm not good enough and I have to be better. And in part, I'm taking time to speak it out more because it's such a common thing for people, right? It's so, again, it's the water that people swim in. So many of us grew up with just that embedded concept that we have to be better. We're not good enough. Right? So go ahead. You want to say something there?
I think that's absolutely right. And so many of my clients come to me with some sort of sense of that what they're wanting in life hasn't happened because they're somehow broken or flawed or in need of repair or something like that. And part of my job is to help them to see, first and foremost, is that they're not broken, that they're absolutely fine just as they are, but that the narrative that they have about themselves, that's what needs to change. And the important piece for me, the underlying piece for me that's created the biggest shift is actually learning to let go of those old judgments, and by actually forgiving myself for those judgments, by really letting go of those judgments, which has created a space for me to create a completely new narrative about myself, a completely new list of these declarations that I now recite daily that are reflective of who I'm being in the world.
Yes. Hallelujah. Thank you. And we have some common influences, no doubt, and some similarities in terms of how we work ourselves and how we work with clients. I use for myself what I call a document, a manifesto, right? And it's full of declarations, and I find the same thing that it was been and sometimes still is a big part of my journey to forgive and let go of the ways that I'm mean to myself and the judgments, and I find that to be true of pretty much everybody I work with, just in different ways and to different degrees. So I'd love to go deeper with you on that. When people start to wake up to, and maybe you help them wake up to, out of love, these judgments, mean things that people think and say about themselves, how do you help them? And yourself, maybe, whatever you want to say, but in terms of how does that forgiveness work or not work? Well, actually, I'll say one more thing, because when I first got into spiritual development, personal development stuff, 1996, I met Byron Katie and learned the work from her. An incredible being, incredible teacher. A year later, I was on stage with her and I was doing the work and I understood it and I was teaching people about it. And for those that don't know, it's a method for letting go of negative narratives. And for me at that time, it was great. It was helpful. However, it only went so deep and it only got me so far because it remained for me somewhat of an intellectual process. And so does that make sense for you? And I know I've spoken a lot to ask this question, but what happens for you as I say all that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say for me that the process that I'm referring to, I didn't know it when I was heading into it, but it very quickly became apparent to me that it wasn't an intellectual exercise. It was actually a spiritual process, a process of really, really deep change that has ended up in me completely changing the relationship that I have with myself. And so the process that I went through, it involved, just at a very high level, it involved me becoming aware of all of the old judgments that I had used to leverage myself, my outcomes, my journey through life, and one by one to take those judgments and to let go, to actually forgive myself. I grew up in kind of my parents took me to church, and I was involved in churches for many years, as a child and as an adult. And I understood the idea of forgiveness, but I'd always seen that as something that was for somebody else. I had to forgive somebody else. I'd never applied that to me. I'd never seen the possibility of what it would feel like, what it could feel like to experience that turned back on myself, and to forgive myself for all of the judgments that I had carried over myself for so many years. And what that effectively did, as I forgave myself for those judgments one by one, it created I'm going to call it just a space within me, or a space within my soul. I'm not sure what the right language is even, that allowed new language to come through. It wasn't that I was creating the language. It felt like language that came through me, or came to me, or was given to me. And that was the process at a very high level that I went through to create my new declarations. It was not an intellectual exercise that I thought it was at the outset, and I think the depth of that for me, it was very powerful as I went through the process. But I've been able to continue to carry that with me. That self-forgiveness is always available to me when I inevitably fall back into judgment of myself, because that's just the way. I think that's just the way it works. There's when there's an option to judge ourselves, I quite often take it. I take it less frequently now, because I have access to a different narrative through this document that is made up of these declarations.
Yeah, beautifully said. I'm right there with you. The way I think of it often is when I do that kind of process effectively, it's like a bubble opens up, right? That I was enclosed with something, I wasn't even aware of it. If I can actually feel that sense of forgiveness, and it's like a space is there, and then this possibility opens up.
Mm.
And the other thing that I connect to with what you said, and I do my best to convey this to people all the time, is forgiveness is, especially forgiveness for self, is not something that, for me at least, not something I was trained in as a kid. Like I learned how to play baseball. I learned how to take care of the yard, right? I learned how to write, right? I learned all kinds of skills, but I did not get training in forgiveness.
Mm.
And in fact, I didn't see it modeled around me very much either, right? I did actually get training in judgment. That was modeled a lot. So as I've learned the value and the importance of it, part of my stance is like, there's very few skills that are more important in the world than this. And anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first, and worth doing over and over again. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, continuing to evolve that skill is paramount.
Yeah, I really agree with that. That's how it feels and looks to me. The whole idea of I think I'm going to put it this way: until I learned to forgive myself, the possibility for me to actually feel love for myself, it wasn't there. It didn't exist. What letting go of these judgments, what forgiving myself for the judgments has created, is the possibility that I could actually love myself as a person. And that's been the, I guess, a trajectory I've been on, particularly over the last just over 2 years. That's probably the biggest piece of work that I've been doing to work on my growth recently.
Okay, cool. Well, I was just about to ask you kind of a final question, but since you said that, I've got another one that inserts itself first, which is,
Sure.
what's the impact of that? You know, a couple of years of journey into loving yourself. What changes?
I think first and foremost, my relationship with myself, how I think about myself is very different. How I think about what's possible for me is very different. I mean, what's possible now? It looks different to me because, and I'm going to phrase it this way: my judgments of myself came from a place of fear. The language of my document come from a place of love and compassion. And the way I see this is the old language of fear, the energy of fear it's not as strong as the energy of love. Love is the most powerful force that I believe exists in the universe. And when I am coming at my life from a place of love as opposed to fear, I think what's possible, it becomes infinitely greater. The power of love is infinitely greater than the power of fear. And that's just my perspective on it. I don't know if people will agree with that or not, but that's how it looks to me. And so my thinking about myself, my relationship with myself, how I show up to my clients, what I see to be possible for them because of what I see now to be possible for me, that has changed and transformed. So my relationship with my clients is changing. The other big thing that I will say is I adopted this document in January of 2023. And 6 months after that, in July of that year, my wife came to me. My wife of 32 years at that time came to me and said, "You've changed. How do I get one of these documents?" And so she now has a document. And in many ways, when I created this document and adopted it and started to use it, I've told people it was an experiment. I wanted to see if this would work or not work. And I have no better evidence than when my wife Jules came to me and said, "You're changing. You've changed. How do I get one of these?" And she I mean, I met her when I was 17. She knows me better than anybody else on this planet by a long way. And for her to say that was all I needed to know to just double down on my commitment to this process of letting go of judgment, of forgiving myself, of learning to love myself more, and letting the power of my document, those declarations that were full of love and possibility and understanding and compassion, be the fuel that energize me as I come at my life.
Hallelujah. That is beautiful. And I'll piggyback one little piece on what you said of, like, what you said, I don't know if people will believe me, speaking of love being more powerful than fear. And in some ways, speaking of the value of the self-forgiveness. And so my suggestion, my admonition to the audience is, remember earlier when I said, don't just be entertained, like try don't believe Peter, don't believe me, try it on yourself, see what happens if you actually have the courage and some commitment required to notice the negative thoughts, to notice the judgments, and then to actually forgive them. See what happens for you in your life. And and if we're crazy about it and it's not that way for you, let us know. Maybe it's not. I'm really curious to find out, though, what happens for you. So time's flying, Peter. This is it's an amazing opportunity to speak with you. I love your wisdom, your experience, your humility, and all that you're sharing. And is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to bring forward?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation, Daniel. It's actually been a lot of fun. It's been great. There's nothing. We've touched on some of the most important parts of my life, and the important parts of my own personal journey, and my growth, and my commitment to that. So no, I appreciate what we've talked about. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, cool. Well, then I will ask you the final question, the big question. I describe it as the impossible question because it's so big. Your experience is vast. Your knowledge, your wisdom is vast. And this question is inviting you to distill all of that into one thing. So if there was one thing that you could share, just one thing to share with our audience to help them live their most vibrant, thriving life, what's that one thing?
I would say similar to just what you said a few minutes ago, but I would say my hunch is the vast majority of people that will watch this interview are well experienced with living their life through a lens or a filter of self-judgment to create their outcomes. And if that's you, I'm going to say experiment with changing that filter from fear that is basically at the heart of judgment. Change that filter from fear to love. See what happens.
See what happens. That's beautiful. I love it. All right. Well, Peter, thank you. Not just for this time that you've invested with us, and that for sure, late at night over there in Ireland. I appreciate that. Also, though, thank you for your courage and your commitment, your work, the ways you have developed yourself to be able to show up here and bring so much value to our audience. So thank you so much for being with us.
Totally my pleasure.
Oh, I almost forgot. Sorry to interrupt you. I almost forgot. You were so kind to offer a gift for our audience, or more accurately, for one person in our audience, one person who has the wisdom and the rapidity to send you an email. And do I have it right that you're offering to invest some of your time with somebody in giving them a coaching experience?
Yes, that's right. The opportunity is to spend 90 minutes with me, and we will explore whatever it is that person wants to explore, and do some coaching work in and around the change that they want to make in their world.
Okay, that's a very generous and beautiful gift. So first person that sends Peter an email, that's exciting. It feels like a contest. I feel like a telephone radio host or something, get those lines ringing. So I put the email address on the screen. If, however, you are listening and not watching, I say it out loud. It's Peter, Peter, at pm-coaching.co.uk, right? Yeah. And you can rewind if I said it fast. So thank you for that. That's a beautiful gift. And again, thank you for being with us, Peter.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it, Daniel.
Yeah, all right. And y'all in our audience, the superheroes, the ones on the real heroic journey here, thank you for being with us and giving us the pleasure, the honor, the privilege to be with you, to have the chance to share about stuff that, has mattered for us in our lives and matters. And I love that you are on the journey you are on to grow and to learn, to make your life even more beautiful. So thank you. I hope you join us again soon. We got more magic coming up. And in the meantime, and always, please, please, please make your life a masterpiece. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.